Good afternoon, everyone. In our session this afternoon, we're going to talk about consumers, 2035, 10 years hence. And we're going to try and be a bit more expansive in that we'll talk about human futures, people of the future. What is it that we want to be? How do we see ourselves? And so on. And we'll get into some of what we'll cover in just a second. But before we do, I'd really love to introduce my three absolutely brilliant speakers here on stage with me. I feel enormously privileged to be sat with Linda, Anu, and Meabh, all of whom have a multitude of expertise to be talking to this topic. So Linda, I think it's fair to say that you sit at the coalface of where humans have to deal with brands and, how we will shape that sustainably into the future. Anu has a lifetime, decades worth of experience of serving consumer-led brands, but has now moved across to the bright side of purpose and the business models that we will look to as humans in the future. And Meabh, eminent tech expert, but not just in the world of futures and AI. Meabh is sitting on the board of the Long Now Foundation, which gives us a good look at the past as well as the distant future. So across all of these things, I think we'll have a good adventure on stage this afternoon. And what we'd love to do is talk about, I guess, maybe three different spheres of what the next 10 years of people might look like. So we think it would be good to start with contextual futures. What is some of the influence that shapes how we see ourselves, make decisions, and so on? So we might talk about things like geopolitics and climate and sustainable and some of the broad macro forces that shape our lives. We'd then like to get into creative futures, innovative futures. How will tech and AI shape our decision making, and what will we dictate versus what we will be dictated by? And then the final piece around identity. Who actually will we be in the future? What will shape our decision making, our influence, how we choose to show up in society in the future? So if we get through all of that, we'll be doing brilliantly. And we'd obviously love to hear from you. We'd love your questions. We'd love you to participate, and we'll open it up as we move through the session. Before we jump into the material, I'd like each of our speakers to say a brief word about themselves. Linda, do you want to start?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Linda Arvidsson, and I'm from the H&M Group in Stockholm. I work in our innovation and strategy function, and I've been working from a human-centered level since leading our design thinking processes, but over the past couple of years introducing the capability of futures and foresight. So that's the journey that we are on right now.
Yeah, hi, I'm Anu, and thanks for the introduction, Meabh. I've worked in CPG, consumer goods, for the last 27 plus years, leading brands like Dove, Lipton, Ben & Jerry's, Pukka. For the last 2 years, I've focused more on governance. So I'm on boards like the B Corp movement, so I'm the B Lab, but also boards of different sizes, essentially with different organizational structures and ownership structures that are different, in order to really understand what is responsible business and what should responsible businesses for the future be like.
Meabh.
Yeah, thanks, Meabh, and thank you to Dubai Future Foundation for this wonderful learning event. I'm confident we're going to learn a ton on this panel and from all the other events. As Meabh mentioned, I lead the futures team at Salesforce. We're a small team that helps the company anticipate, imagine, and shape the future. We spend about 2/3 of our time doing internal strategy. There's a lot going on in tech right now that is uncertain, so a lot of work to do there. And then we spend about 1/3 of our time speaking with customers, speaking at conferences like this, and publishing. I have a background in futures going back 20 years to Global Business Network, and as you said, recently joined the board of Long Now.
Great. So where should we start? I think maybe let's start in today. And I think we talk a lot about unity, connectedness, what we see and shape together. But I think it's fair to say that there's a lot of disconnectedness. We've never perhaps been more polarized when it comes to our politics and the causes that we stand up for or we sign up to. There's a lot of things that we maybe don't see eye to eye on. And I think one interesting terror, if we lean into what that would look like for business and what we want from business is, what do we want companies or the brands that we buy from to stand for, we see that around 2/3 of people will buy from companies that share their values, whatever those values may be. But in a world that's so polarized or polarizing, is that even possible? Can we stand for something any longer? Linda, let me come to you on that.
Yeah, I think it's been an interesting sort of decade that we're coming out of, where brands and businesses have sort of stepped up and taken sort of charge of some of the questions around sustainability and diversity and inclusion. Maybe like playing where governments can't really play a role and taking on that role. But then we've seen that sort of backlash now over the past couple of years. But I'm kind of hoping that the backlash of the backlash will be the next level of purpose, maybe more of from a practice point of view.
I mean, and you design purpose every day. What are some of the business models that might emerge from that purposeful space that we think humans will connect to and show up for?
Yeah, I mean, my perspective and what I've seen actually running businesses that are purpose-driven is that the purposes are the North Star. The purpose of a business is the North Star that is either set by the foundation or runs all the way through the organization. That helps the organization weather all the various storms, including the storms where consumers say they don't want purpose anymore, right? So it's that North Star that really helps businesses stay true to what they believe they should be doing, regardless of whether the consumer gets it or not. And I think as we go forward, that's going to be even more important. I'm sure we'll speak about AI and how that changes our roles. And therefore, what does meaning mean? Meaning mean for talent, meaning mean for consumers. So my perspective is purpose stays, but it has to stay within as a North Star, not as something that you put as a tag on your pack. And there are many interesting business models that do that, like the B Corp movement, for example, which we can talk about.
Okay. Yeah. Mick, before I come to you, I was going to try and bring this down a level to what would this mean for, what would meaning look like for humans? So another big territory that I think we're all trying to grasp is something like climate change and what our relationship to the planet needs to be. And actually, let's bring up a projection. If we can cue to the presentation. This is where, will the tech work? It will. Is it this one? Oh, we've moved through a few more slides than I intended. This is the one that we were thinking about. So this is talking about, I guess, a relationship with the planet and nature specifically. We see perhaps as a antidote or a counterpoint to the urban epicenters that we live in and the pressure on our lives, the need to reconnect with real things, nature being one of them. And we can see that demand for realness and things we can touch and that help ourselves is only going to grow. How else do we see this sort of showing up in our lives? Mick, I don't know how you can relate to that sort of reality of what we can touch and feel versus just virtual worlds.
Yeah,
everywhere.
I think in a time when much of the climate news has been not so great. One of the positive areas of climate action in the last decade has been the growth of kind of a view of nature positivity and biodiversity in all its forms. So initiatives like 1 Trillion Trees, which we're a major supporter of, the contribution that trees can make to retaining carbon rather than letting it go into the atmosphere, and then also mangroves can be even more effective at that. So there's a whole biodiversity angle on climate which has started to become more important, which I think is helpful and contributes also to kind of maintaining the nature that people are going to want to spend more time in. So that's one angle that I think is one to watch going forward. Yeah.
If we say phrases like boycotting rather than boycotting, or community pulling, or activism, or do we think like consumers can engage with the purpose of companies, or really are they just too busy wondering about nature or day-to-day living? Do we care about purpose really? Anu, that's a really horrible question for you.
So look, I've worked on brands like Dove, right, which have worked to change the stereotype of what real beauty looks like.
Yep.
Yeah? And yes, it is important that consumers care about that as well. And possibly Dove has tapped into that innate discomfort that women feel everywhere around the world. That, look, the way I'm portrayed is not the way I want my child to be portrayed. So I think that lofty word of purpose needs to stay as a North Star within the company. Its expression outward is relevant for consumers. But you've got to work really hard to make it relevant for consumers.
Yeah.
But you know, the fact that I want to be portrayed not in the way that sometimes, or not most of the time, beauty is portrayed, is pretty much universal. So, and I think that's the trick. The trick is really translating your purpose that drives your business into something that resonates at a human level with what we feel. And that could be with beauty, that could be with the way we associate ourselves with nature. It could be many different things. But I think that's the trick.
I think one of the things that we engage with, I suppose, to your point, is the challenges that we find hardest to resolve. One example that I'm sort of fascinated with, especially for Linda, is the Swedish brand Koya. And instead of them selling perfume, their perfumers, they had people come and give 10 minutes of their time to sit in the forest. And if you did that, you were given the bottle of perfume. So effectively, the reality of the attention economy showing up in a Swedish forest recently. And you know, I mention this because it was said on stage in the opening address this morning, you know, attention and focus is the biggest gift that we have to give in the future. How will any of us harness it? Mick, did you want to pick up on that point?
I was coming in on the
let's
previous
go back.
point, if that's okay.
Let's go
Sorry,
back.
just on the, we talk about purpose kind of can cover a lot of things, but just on the issue of sustainability. So we did some work on kind of net zero scenario a few years ago, and what would it take to get to a kind of the positive net zero trajectory? And we're quite far away from it right now. And one of the elements was a shift from consumers and just citizens in the direction of demanding more action on climate. I think in the context of purchasing, we then saw, you know, coming out of COVID when we had a massive inflation and cost of living crisis, that some of these issues seem to, you know, become less important to people. But I think what it highlights is the issue of if we want to make kind of consumption more sustainable, we have two levers. One is, you know, the shifting of consumer preferences in the direction, right, which is about, you know, finding brands that align with their purpose, you know, elements like the Swedish company you just mentioned, right? That's about shifting people's preferences at a macro level. You know, whatever we think about today, Tesla made electric cars sexy, right? In a way that they weren't prior to that. And so that was a shift of consumer preferences in the direction of considering electric car for people who might not have done that before. So that was a significant move. But the second part of it then is that too many products and services are still paying. There's a green premium, right? There's the inexpensive version of it, and then there's the, you know, the sustainable alternative, which is considerably more expensive. So there's a ton of things that technology and innovation and businesses can focus on in order to drive that cost down so that it's more accessible for a wider group of people. And I think expecting kind of everyone to bring their morality to every purchase is not necessarily going to be the winning strategy.
I think accessibility is a great point to make. And again, this morning, I don't know if anyone saw the speaker talking about, let's come to you, Linda, you know, sustainable fashion in the future is the organic food of today. So, you know, it's much more accessible to many more people, even if it still carries something of a premium. Can you relate to that?
Yeah, but I just wanted to circle back to, you know, the choice of things and also looking at, you know, the say-do gap.
Yes.
When we interact with our customers, you know, everyone keeps saying that, you know, I want to do the right thing. I care about transparency. I care about, you know, making equality, making the right choice. But at the end of the day, there's always something that, you know, is more important, and that's your time, and that's the price. And I think that's our responsibility to cater for both. So, and going back to what you were talking about, the perfume, I think that's really interesting because what we also see is that, you know, sometimes you want to save time. And that's, you know, we're kind of in this society where we expect no friction. It's like one-click experiences and it's next day deliveries. We've grown kind of accustomed to it. It's habits now. But we also want to spend time. So we need to cater for both. And I think that the perfume example is, you know, how do you build that in?
Yeah. I think it's interesting that, you know, paying with our time, it's such a refreshing way to think about what might be possible in the future. If we maybe think about how we innovate our way through the future, and let's come to actually maybe this quote from you, Mick. I wanted to spend some time on what's the compatibility of climate and also how we're, shaping up with things like AI. I mean, twice as many people are anxious about the impact of AI on climate as they are positive about the possibilities of what it can bring to us. How do we square these things?
Yeah, I think there's a few things going on. One, I would say just it's important that we're here at a global conference, and there's a wide range of a spectrum of opinions around kind of what AI will do. So there's tends to be a much more positive attitude to AI in certain emerging economies, China, India, for example, way ahead of the West. And so it's important to kind of recognize that different, perhaps in situations where it's creating more opportunity more visibly than, rather than rearranging kind of opportunity, it feels like maybe more in the West. That's one thing. On the subject of energy, I think, there are huge energy issues to be overcome in terms of the projected growth of data centers, in particular around AI. At the same time, I think, the initial cost of training a model, what we've seen is, GPT-4 level of intelligence, the efficiency has kind of, the cost went down kind of 99.7% in 2 years, right? So I think it's important to realize that we have so much efficiency gains that we can make, and the necessity is the mother of invention, right? We're seeing a huge amount of innovation now happening in terms of how data centers can be made more efficient. And there's a lot more to do. There's more to do in kind of energy production for those. So that's a point to this quote here, just to make sense, contextualize it for folks as well. I think the other side then is the opportunity of what AI can do. So this is really in the context of thinking about kind of scope 3 emissions, which is a big focus of climate action. How do you get companies to be able to have an accountability for their entire value chain that they're involved in, scope 3, their suppliers and tiers of suppliers. And fundamentally today, we can't really take effective action on this because it's not really instrumented. And humans will never be able to. Humans, it's just ineffective and too costly to actually be able to fully instrument and calculate what's actually going on with scope 3 emissions. So we rely on estimates, small consultancies, Excel sheets, etc. But we can now start to see in some early startups and experiments that are happening, you can start to see how agents, AI agents operating kind of across these value chains, which are able to gather data, synthesize data, see patterns, might offer, as this quote suggests, kind of a new way for us actually to get a clear real-time picture of what's going on and to identify the opportunities to make things better. So I think it's important that we balance the conversation around AI with an understanding of the opportunities that it presents as well.
Well, I mean, continuing on that theme of opportunity, but maybe moving us into the, I think slides have moved in a slightly different order than I'm anticipating, but we can go back and forth. This is where I wanted to go next. Again, that space of opportunity, and obviously the other thing that, not to be a pessimist for a second, but the thing that we're also anxious about, never mind climate, is what the opportunity is for us. And we're, obviously relentless reports on job replacement, etc. I mean, this is just one estimate, essentially looking at 78 million in terms of net job creation. But of course, there's going to be a ton of displacement happening. Again, how do we prepare ourselves for that? What are some of the things that is, people and consumers we need to think about in terms of reinventing ourselves for this future job market?
Yeah. When I sit on boards and boards of different sizes, I think the thought is more long-term. It's more long-term in terms of what will talent look like and how do we prepare ourselves for that place where a lot of the work will be fractional. So the roles are not going to be set roles because they'll break. But I think most importantly, we don't really know what will come out there. So I know I'm in a futurist conference where everyone kind of knows what's going to happen in the future. But sitting on the boardrooms, we don't. So what we have to prepare for is a very different kind of leader. A leader who's able to combine gut instinct along with being able to confront and face conflict. And conflict as in even trends conflicts, right? So it's shifting the conversation about what we have to upskill ourselves with, and the answer most of the time isn't a course. It's really skills that are much more inner development skills, and really connecting with yourself as leaders as well. So it's skills that I think in the old world would have sounded woo-woo, but are not anymore. They're really essential skills of what we as humans need, which will allow us to benefit, use, leverage AI in the way that will be regenerative, in fact.
So we've, to that skills point, I've put a projection up that speaks to that. You know, again, the expected explosion in terms of self-teaching. It's already a large phenomenon, but, you know, the mother of necessity here, we will have to continually reinvent. And I think it's fair to say that we've maybe been surprised by just how many people like us have already learned to use these tools to reinvent ourselves. What else do you see coming down the track? Linda, did you want to talk to?
No, but maybe I'm like the tech pessimist in the room. Looking at you.
There always has to be at least one tech
I'm not
pessimist.
a pessimist, but I'm very cautious, and especially looking from like the human perspective of things. I keep thinking about agency and choice and sort of I don't know what's going to come after, and I think that we've seen some of these patterns before, where we're kind of like all in on things because it's gonna it kind of praises or it teaches us that we're going to and know more and do more and be more, and I think that, you know, just looking at social media and all those type of things, it kind of it promised like the empowerment of us doing so much more and connecting so much more, and for a while, you know, that's what it felt like. But then what do we have now? It's sort of like the backside of, you know, we're kind of more disconnected than ever. And so when we're looking at, you know, AI and moving in now, I think that we need to be very cautious to think about, okay, well, what are the skills that also being eroded? What are the human capabilities that we really want to treasure and bring forward? And so that's something that I really think about when we talk about the human perspective of things.
As you build a brand that is inevitably going to have an exchange with consumers in the future that will go via AI, agentic AI, etc., how will you shape that? What is today seen as a premium of human time and interaction? What are some of the things that you're innovating in that space to?
I mean, I wish I had the answer to it. It's all
an
exploration for all of us, and I think for all brands right now, we need to keep an eye on that, and we need to experiment and really think about, okay, well, what's that going to be for us going forward? The relationship between brands and consumers is going to shift dramatically, and also how do you stay on the minds of the consumers?
Mick, we know you're a tech optimist. And you know, you talk about personal empowerment and also things like the imagination leap. And if only we can just, you know, get there. Talk to us about where you see this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting the point around attention that you were talking about earlier, and the kind of some of the critiques that have been fairly made of social media and what it did for us. I mean, I've been thinking for several years that if the algorithms felt like they were working against individuals in service of big tech for maybe that time, you know, you're being profiled, you're being personalized, you're being targeted, you're being brought down rabbit holes of radicalization in some cases, right, via social media. Anyone in the room who's used a ChatGPT or one of its peers, right? I'm guessing we probably at 100%, yeah? Everyone's had that moment where something happens, you do something, and you think to yourself, wow, I personally could never have done this before. Maybe your vibe coding you were kind of referencing implicitly there. Or I could have done this, but it would have taken me, you know, maybe 10 times as long. And so, you know, the AI is working for you. It's giving you personal productivity. And that I think, you know, that's a huge opportunity for us moving forward. And I would, you know, I'm trying not to be purely tech optimistic, but I do think it's important to kind of rebalance the conversation so that we see these types of things. And to your earlier question, Meabh, around kind of attention and where we might go, I really liked, like you in the opening session, where, you know, the connected, focused minds of the population becomes the greatest asset of a country. I thought that was a nice way of putting it. And, you know, when we have personal AI operating on our behalf, it's going to be more difficult for brands to find the attention of the customer, because in many cases, if you're not managing that relationship with your customers and your potential customers and your brand well, then they will just, you know, they will delegate to a personal AI agent the management of brands with all of these people who are outside my trust boundary. And so you got to work harder to get inside that trust boundary and understand who that customer is and what it is that they value, and to build a relationship with them that delivers value over time.
A lot of the businesses are moving towards retreats of some sort, because, you know, they're finding that the people need that away time, and you know, what's providing them with that. So there's a whole set of people who've kind of moved off standard jobs and kind of setting up smaller retreats
Yep.
And I think it's how do you then combine that? Because that's also a need. So how do we find the right way to kind of cater to what people are actually craving for and what we're also predicting will be there in the future, right? Where, I might pay for stuff that allows me to actually have more focus, mindfulness, groundedness. And I think these are the areas where consumer needs are definitely shifting.
Well, let's pivot to that. Here are some examples on stage of, I think it's fair to say we didn't see this kind of reinvention or creativity coming. Anna, you're talking about mindfulness. There are a couple of things, I think, in terms of long-term social needs that have really changed in the last decade. A swing, for example, back towards what we might call traditional values, a far higher number of, unsurprisingly, men agreeing with statements like, it's a man's role to earn the household income and it's a woman's role to keep home. Agreement with that statement has globally doubled in the last 10 years. That, we didn't expect to see that. And, we could talk about what's driving that. I think spiritualism, religion has exploded. And again, we didn't see that ticking upwards as a need or as a sort of future form of self-expression. And yet, some of these things, I mean, if we just take the example of AstroTalk, I think they have 70 million users. The AstroTalk app market in India alone is forecast to be worth 1.8 billion in the next 5 years. So it's just in India alone. And, some of these are brilliant. Last night we were talking amongst ourselves about my absolute favorite example of this is an AI hologram of Jesus, basically, hosted by a Swiss church where you could talk to God in one of 100 languages. And that ran as an experiment for, I think, a year. And around 2/3 of the people that interacted felt that it was a deeply spiritual experience. So, virtual spirituality, the increase of, I suppose, maybe meaning. Who are we? Let's talk about that for a moment.
I even think, Sweden being the most secular country in the world, we've seen quite a jump in, kids or younger people wanting to, get confirmed in church because, they're looking for some sort of like belonging and some sort of forum to be talking about existential questions. But I think that has more to do with, the belonging rather than maybe like the religious part. So
that makes sense.
I'm waiting for AI to kind of do all my work so I can spend my time in retreats and in meditation. I mean, that would be fabulous.
Brilliant. Mick, please.
Just maybe you want to challenge the idea that the resurgence of religion is something that should be seen as a surprise. I think I'm remembering a slide. This is the problem of being in futures for a while. You remember a slide. I remember creating a slide in 2009 which had data on the rise of Pentecostalism and charismatic Catholicism in Africa. And there were literally, hundreds of millions of people who were, engaging with a very engaging form of Christian religion, right? Very kind of charismatic Catholicism, basically similar to Pentecostalism, but on the Catholic side. And so we've seen that. And there's a phrase, John Berger, the English critic, had a phrase which said, it is not the persistence of organized religion that requires explanation, but rather its absence. Organized religion has been with us for a long time. So putting my long now hat on, I would say, there's a blip of secularism that we experienced, particularly in the West, in the middle of the 20th century, and we're now, in some places that never happened. In other places, we went through that process, and we've come back to, a deep human hunger for meaning and purpose in life, which many people, and a connection to community, which many people find in religion. There's another line by an Irish singer-songwriter, clubs are good, but you can't beat a big religion to tie your soul to the multitude. And I think that's what we're experiencing.
I mean, we could threaten to break into song at any given moment here. My favorite reference is the personal Jesus. Have any Depeche Mode fans in the audience? Yeah, excellent.
So to finish the line, someone who knows your prayers, someone who cares.
Okay, we are officially in a rabbit hole. I'm just going to pull us back out. But your point is absolutely right, Mick. Maybe we shouldn't at all be surprised. And I look forward to the day when I can practice all of this in a bar when I'm in China. Moving on to maybe some of our other fundamentally human points that we expect to stick around. We've talked about upskilling, reinvention. I think we see that sort of constant pressure to profile ourselves in these online worlds, and that just gently ticks along and ticks upwards. But if we look at like self-expression in the future, clearly it's going to be ever more virtual and avatarial, if we can say that. What are some of the other ways in which, if we can say, self-actualization will come to bear for us as humans over the next 10 years?
Nature connection?
I mean, self-actualization in terms of that. I'm assuming we've all, met our basic fundamental needs of, food, water, and access to AI, but, to survive. But, what are the big points around self-expression that you think?
I think the bit that actually keeps me a bit worried and a bit upset is the fact that we're all talking from a place of privilege.
Yes.
And the whole aspect of self-actualization might get quite reversed on its head. And that's in the coming years. And not least because of AI, but because of just climate change and the overall polarization that's happening, even when we don't take into account, technology. And I think that's why when I'm trying to think of self-actualization, I think I'm very conscious that I'm speaking from a place of privilege. And I would love to have answers on how do we really make sure that we're taking everyone along with us. And I don't think we're having enough conversations on that at all.
It's a very fair point. Meabh, please.
Yeah, I look at the Memoji and I kind of think, well, Apple made it really easy to make one. Was it really an expression of consumer preferences, or was it a reduction of friction? I feel like the opportunity moving forward will be people using the tools that are available online, or not just online, but technology, to improve their lives offline and to spend more time offline. I think we've all gone through a kind of the poor teenagers who grew up in the last 10 years were the guinea pigs of what it's like to grow up online, what it's like to spend your life online, what it's like to be subject to the feeling of being, surveilled by the whole world. And it wasn't a good experiment. We didn't come out with some good outcomes from that. So I think there's a kind of a shift. We looked at, the coming out of COVID, the kind of, we got the benefits of technology. Many of us were able to, the privilege, those of us who were in knowledge work, et cetera, were able to work online. But we also experienced the benefits of being connected to the people we were around again, right? And so there's a kind of a more of a tech detox kind of attitude now that I think is going to continue. And I think there's huge opportunity for people to not just use technology in a way to fluff up their online appearance, but rather to improve the quality of their life in meaningful ways, using kind of the empowerment and the additional kind of firepower, right, and superpowers that even that AI can give you, complementing your own skills and finding what people want is beyond a certain level of income. It's purpose, autonomy, and mastery. And a lot of them don't get that from kind of employment. So I think entrepreneurship is an interesting area to watch. People who may have had some of the creativity that you need to be an entrepreneur, but not some of the other administrative skills. And AI can take care of a lot of that for you now.
Let's talk about some of the watch-outs. We were talking last night about, AI. It's still pretty sycophantic right now. It tells us what we want to hear. And, we can create the person that we want to be. And we can, how do we stay real in all of this future that we're shaping for ourselves?
I'm part of a mycelium group of people. We call ourselves the mycelium, so it's still emergent and underground. But it is bioleadership, and a few of us are here in this conference as well, where essentially it's made up of individuals who are professionals in the work life, have kind of gone through certain career paths and are saying, no, I need to find something with more meaning. And it's all very solo entrepreneurs, because they're more individuals who are saying, I'm going to do something myself. And in this case, the ecosystem that's supporting them is not yet completely there. But the ecosystem is, yes, it includes tech, but it's much more than tech. It's much more about connectivity. It's much more about really changing your mindset from a scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset. Really understanding what that means in terms of give, take. And and this is a little bit more out there in the future yet because the actual ecosystems are not there. But how does capital really help to flow in a way that's not just equity? And I think these are the kind of questions that we're asking. Yeah. That the equity model is not going to serve the world in the future. What are the other models that we need to have? What are the stewardship models? What are the guardianship models in business that need to really support this emergent ecosystem?
Yeah, I think the future of reward and equity is likely to see some significant shift simply because, otherwise there just isn't enough cake to divide out. Understood. I'm conscious that you might all like to contribute and the clock is ticking. We still have time, but let's come to some questions in the audience. If you just wait for the mic to arrive to you. So we have a question at the front here. Oh, mic is on its way.
Hello, hello. Thank you, everyone, for the insights. My name is Arthur Kilian, founder of an AI startup coming from Silicon Valley, from the middle of AI bubble. And I have a question for my fellow AI bubble resident, Michael. Coming here on a DFF program to accelerate innovation in governments, I was surprised on the willingness to bridge the old world of kind of like traditional planning and the new way of using AI tools, LLMs, and all of it. And the question is, how far are we from enterprises, companies, from your perspective, obviously at Salesforce, of actually doing the real-time dynamic simulations of like what's happening instead of relying on traditional, piles of Excel sheets from McKinsey and all of that. So.
Yeah, we could go on for hours on that. I don't want to take up the whole panel, so we might have a sidebar conversation. The short answer is I agree with you that that's something that is increasingly possible. And just to pull it back to the consumer for a second, I think this ability to increasingly simulate at scale is going to be something that's also going to benefit individuals. I think the best way. Adult education has generally not great results in terms of getting adults to learn things. It's easier to get kids to learn things than adults. We become experts, and the expert's mind has few possibilities. The one major exception to that is pilots who learn through extremely rich and expensive simulations and have done for many years. And so when a terrible, tragic air crash happens and it was caused by pilot behavior, that gets fed in and all the pilots learn. And it's very successful. We have, incredible rates of safety in airline traffic. And that kind of rich simulation is now going to be increasingly available to not just the businesses that you're describing, but also to individuals to think about their next career, to practice the skills that they need in future. And so I think the whole rise of simulation is, going to be another pull on energy and data centers, et cetera, but it's also going to create huge new opportunities that I think are very positive.
Nice. Do we have any other questions in the audience? Oh, brilliant. The microphone is almost at you.
Thank you. This was a great session. One of my questions was about, you spoke about purpose and translating that expression for your consumers. How does that work when the brand's been around for 50, 100 years and you start looking forward and you need to find your purpose to align with like consumers that are of many different ages?
That's a brilliant question. Good luck, guys. Linda?
No, I don't have the right answer for this, but I think that, where we come from is really important, like our ancestry, our heritage, our DNA. And so we need to look at, okay, what do we need to bring forward and what do we want to bring forward? Some of the things that we've been, doing needs to die so that we can bring in some new things. And I think that, when we talk about purpose, that's really the equation of, okay, well, where do we want to go and what do we need to leave behind?
Anna, did you?
I mean, sometimes even looking at the brands the businesses that have really defined purpose well and translated them well can give clues to businesses that are 150 years old, right? First of all, most likely, if a business is 150 years old, it has a really good, strong purpose already, the founder's purpose. So what I've done in the past, where I've kind of been in charge of middling brands, those that have lost their way, is I've really gone back to the founder's story. And I've gone back to say, why did the founder set this up? And most of the time, that's given me enough fodder to recreate that story as if it was being created by a startup now. Yeah, so that's my practical tip.
That's great. Thank you so much.
We have a question just here.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
We can.
Great. So I work in Diageo, big multinational. We have been going after purpose for a long time, many years. But I work as well in the futures department, and I'm always questioning and wondering, when is the shift that you were talking about of consumers going to be created around purposefully driven products versus the push that we do from a company? I mean, is that a role or a job to be driven by who? What's your view on that topic?
Driven by?
So when does the shift where it's a pull from consumers versus the push that we create as brands taking consumers on that journey?
I can just give you a fact from the B Corp movement. And B Corp movement is a global movement that's around in the world. It's not in some parts, so it's not equal. Yeah, so it started in the US, and it's very present in Australia and in Europe and in the UK. And the UK is one of the fastest growing areas where there are around 2,600 B Corps, and it's becoming even more. I think within Diageo, Bailey's is a B Corp as well. Yeah. My predominant belief is that purpose is what you as a company own. You should not push it you should not expect the consumers to be wanting to have it. That said, we're seeing more and more awareness for example, people turning the pack and trying to say, does this make sense? And that's become 50% in the case of UK with, say, the B Corp movement. There is apps like Good on You, especially on fashion, where again younger consumers are picking it up and looking and saying, oh, this is only a 3. I'm only going to buy a brand that's 5. That's starting. It's very small and it's in pockets. And I think, as the younger consumers become more conscious about their future and what's happening there, I think this is only there to be increased.
So you feel it's going to be more organically than anything else?
I don't think I should be pricing it expecting consumers to be paying for my purpose. I do my purpose because I believe I should be doing the right thing.
Yeah.
This is perhaps a heathen view on this, but I think people will pay for what they feel they need more of in the future, and I think what they'll need more of in the future is human connection. And we can already see that, and there will be a say-do gap here, but that's what people are prepared to pay a premium for. So if they know that service is being delivered by a human versus something automated, I think it's striking that one of the biggest human needs we have is to solve for is loneliness. I think it's striking that, for instance, 1 and 2 Gen Z today are worrying that they're lonely and they're going to be lonelier in the future. So actually human connection, community, time, these are some of the things that I think will drive purpose in a way that people can relate to, rather than a price premium just because it was produced in a better way. But that's just my view.
That's great. Thank you, guys.
We have another question. I must congratulate our runners with the microphones who are extremely agile on their feet.
I've got a question about global consumer brands and where they'll be coming from in the 21st century. In particular, thinking about changing demographics in those countries that have very young populations, Saudi Arabia, India, Nigeria, and what does the panel think about which geographies or countries they think these global brands might emerge from that we aren't used to in the traditional sense of global brands?
Love that question.
I was very pleasantly surprised to hear someone not ethnically Indian talk about using the kids are learning from Khan Academy, and that's become a global brand, right? So I think there's a dichotomy in the word. There's an oxymoron in the word. Global means it can come from anywhere.
We have another question down at the front.
Here.
Just while the microphone is arriving, when I think from what we can observe, the volume of innovation globally is just going up, and I think the diversity of opportunity is there. What will emerge as, you know, mainstream or visible to all of us, it's hard to say. I think we have that phenomenon of regional innovation as well as global innovation at the same time. So, you know, we'll be watching this space. But please, our next question. Hi.
Thank you for being a fantastic moderator. I think you've pulled really great answers.
You're my new best friend.
But I have a question for all the
Please.
speakers here. Since we're talking about job market and how expression is going to change over years, what I've noticed, I'm in the space of inventing the future of talent in UAE for the past 5 years. I work with Gen Zs across the country. There's a slight concern that when we at leadership sit and talk about the future, I've barely ever seen a young individual take those positions. So as an organization that's really concerned about future foresight, building factories, building labs, building solutions, how often do you involve, let's say, a Gen Z or a Gen Alpha in the decision-making process, even if they're not holding position and power?
I think you might be getting a round of applause for that question.
Thank you.
Excellent question. Linda, do you want to talk to that?
No, I think that like we try to involve all people from within the business, people from outside the business, and you know maybe they're not in a decision leadership position, but we're definitely involving them into seeing, okay, well, where do we need to go, and what influences the choices that we make. So I agree with you. I think it's really important, and it should be represented.
I think it's high time that we start including them, because we're talking about 2030, and alhamdulillah, we live in a country that leadership is willing. I think one of the person in the audience said when they're working with the government, they're willing to adopt, but we will be out of relevance if we do not involve them. Apart from feedback and surveys, I know those things exist, but it's really sad that we don't see it.
Well, human encounters. Mick, did you want to pick
Just
up on that
briefly, you know, Silicon Valley startups, I don't know what the average age of founders are these days, but it gets younger and younger. So the other way of them becoming involved is they target you and they take you out if you don't move fast enough. So I think incenting young people and giving more opportunity to young people to not just integrate into existing companies but found their own companies is also super important.
Yeah, and Anu, you were talking about that last night at dinner, about the rise of solopreneurialism and making access into the business community, and with different models and different outcomes more interesting as well. And maybe also out of necessity, because there won't necessarily be the jobs in the land of corporate for.
I think we've really got to kind of prepare not just the future generation but everyone for fragmentation of roles, and therefore how do we kind of set them up. But you're right, I mean, there's a need to really incorporate them much more in, that's the wrong word, need to have the ecosystem to empower the next generation to really have their...
Enablement, yeah. Thank you so much.
Guys, I'm sorry, I see more hands going up, and please, we'll stay around afterwards for the rest of the questions, but we just have 90 seconds left, and I promised my speakers I was going to finish with a deeply painful question for all of them to answer, which is, what is the people prediction that you want to leave the audience with before we leave the room today? When it comes to humans, what do you want to say about legacy, lasting challenges, the big thing to watch out for? And they're all staring at the carpet now, strangely enough. They were warned.
But I really think that 10 years from now, I think that what it means to live a meaningful life, that's something that I'm really excited to find out.
Good.
And I'll build on that. I mean, it's pretty much that, plus enabling individuals to really find meaning in their work and not need to necessarily go on to find the big company in which they find meaning in their work.
Mick?
Yeah, and building on some of my earlier comments, I think that in 2035, individuals will have access to personal AI that's operating on their behalf, that gives them, the power to do things that they couldn't do before, and it'll significantly shift the power balance between individuals as consumers, as citizens, as entrepreneurs, as everything, versus kind of the power structure we have today.
Yeah, all about agency and choice.
Yeah.
I hope I'll get to choose to sit in a forest for more than 10 minutes in 10 years' time. Listen, thank you all for coming, for the brilliant questions. Thank you to my brilliant panelists also. Enjoy the rest of the conference, everyone.